In the small coastal town of Cedar Key, Florida, a gentle breeze carries the scent of salt and the promise of another sun-drenched day. Yet, on a seemingly ordinary morning in June 1992, an undercurrent of fear looms over the idyllic streets. It begins with a voice crackling with urgency, piercing the quiet hum of the police scanner. The voice belongs to Emma Carter, a beloved local teacher, calling to report that her sister, Lily, hasn't returned home. Lily Thompson, 28 years old, was a radiant presence in Cedar Key. Known for her infectious laugh and unwavering kindness, Lily was the kind of person who would remember everyone's birthday and go out of her way to make sure no one felt left out. She worked as a marine biologist at the local research center, where her passion for ocean life was as deep as the waters she studied. The night before her disappearance, Lily had attended a community fundraiser at the marina, where she was last seen chatting animatedly with friends and neighbors. It was an event filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses under the starlit sky. But as the night wore on, Lily slipped away unnoticed by the revelers. As the sun rose, painting the skies with hues of orange and pink, Lily's absence became glaringly apparent. Her car was still parked at the marina, untouched, keys dangling from the ignition. Her purse with her wallet and phone lay on the passenger seat, as if she had intended to return at any moment. Emma's voice, trembling yet resolute, echoes through the police station. "She wouldn't just leave. Something's wrong. Please, you have to find her." The initial investigation seemed promising. The police combed the marina and surrounding areas, while volunteers formed search parties, scouring the beaches and nearby forests. Yet as days turned into weeks, the trail grew colder. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses who could piece together the last moments before Lily vanished. The town, once vibrant and lively, was now shrouded in suspicion and fear. Whispers of foul play rippled through the community, and every glance held an unspoken question. Who among them could have harmed Lily? Her family, clinging to hope, plastered posters with her smiling face on every notice board and shop window. Emma, plagued by sleepless nights, refused to give up. "She's out there," she'd insist to anyone who'd listen. "We just need to find her." But as summer faded into fall, Lily's disappearance slipped into the shadows, becoming another unsolved mystery, a haunting echo in the heart of Cedar Key. The town returned to its routine, but the question of what happened to Lily Thompson lingered like a specter, refusing to be forgotten. For years the case remained dormant, gathering dust in the corners of the police station, until a single phone call decades later would crack the silence wide open and bring an unexpected arrest that would shock Cedar Key to its core. The morning light cast long shadows across the Cedar Key police station as officers gathered around a hastily arranged briefing. The air was thick with urgency, the kind that only comes when a life hangs in the balance. Sheriff Daniels, a veteran with 30 years on the force, stood at the helm, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to act fast," he urged, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "Lily Thompson hasn't been seen since last night. Her car's at the marina, but there's no sign of her. We have a window of time here. Let's not waste it." The first 48 hours were crucial, everyone knew that. Officers were dispatched to canvass the area, knocking on doors, asking questions. They scoured security footage from nearby businesses, hoping for a glimpse of Lily's last known movements. The town's tight-knit community, once a comfort, now seemed like an intricate web of secrets. Emma, Lily's closest friend, sat on a bench outside the station, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She was joined by Lily's parents, whose expressions were etched with worry and disbelief. "She was so excited about the festival," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She wouldn't just leave." But as the hours ticked by, cracks began to show in the investigation. A witness claimed to have seen Lily talking to a man at the marina, but the description was vague. Another reported hearing a woman scream near the docks, but no evidence supported the claim. Each lead, once promising, dissipated into thin air, leaving the police grasping at straws. The pressure was palpable. The town's usual tranquility was replaced with an undercurrent of fear and suspicion. Gossipy whispers filled the local diner, and community meetings turned into forums of frustration and blame. As the sun set on the second day, a critical mistake emerged. In the rush to act, the area where Lily's car was found hadn't been properly secured. Potential evidence was contaminated by well-meaning volunteers. Footprints were trampled, and fingerprints smudged beyond recognition. What could have been crucial clues were now lost in the chaos of concern. Sheriff Daniels felt the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. "We can't let this slip through our fingers," he muttered to himself, knowing full well that every passing minute made the trail grow colder. Despite the setbacks, there was a glimmer of hope. A local fisherman claimed to have seen a small boat leaving the marina around the time Lily disappeared. "It was odd," he recounted to the officers. "Looked like it was in a hurry, didn't recognize the boat." This new information reignited the investigation. The focus shifted to the waters surrounding Cedar Key as divers and boats were deployed to search for any sign of Lily or the mysterious vessel. But as night fell once again, the sea remained silent, its depths holding on to secrets that refused to surface. The town held its breath, caught in the suspense of the unknown. And as the first 48 hours came to a close, one haunting question lingered in the hearts of all who knew Lily. Was she still out there, waiting to be found? Or was the answer to her disappearance buried deeper than anyone dared to imagine? In the dim light of dawn, Cedar Key awoke to a new day, but one overshadowed by uncertainty and fear. Within the confines of the sheriff's office, the air was thick with tension as Sheriff Daniels convened his team for a critical briefing. The pressure was mounting, and the townspeople were growing restless. Every eye in the room bore the weight of a shared responsibility, a burden heavy yet unspoken. "We need to retrace Lily's last known steps," Daniels instructed, his voice a mixture of determination and fatigue. Every detail, no matter how small, could be the key. Officers were dispatched to canvass the area, speaking with anyone who might have crossed paths with Lily that fateful night. At the small cafe where Lily often stopped for her morning coffee, a waitress recalled seeing her the day before her disappearance. "She seemed distracted," the waitress noted, a hint of worry in her eyes. "Like something was on her mind, but she didn't say much." Meanwhile, at Lily's family home, her parents were enveloped in a haze of disbelief and despair. Her mother, clinging to a photograph of Lily, recounted their last conversation. "She was excited about the weekend," she said, her voice trembling. "We were supposed to go to the farmer's market together. She promised she'd call me in the morning." The father, a stoic figure now unraveling, spoke with a quiet resolve. "Lily wouldn't just leave. Something must have happened to her. We need to find her." Back at the marina, officers were questioning dock workers and fishermen, hoping to glean any information about the mysterious boat sighting. One older fisherman, hunched over with years of hard labor, offered a lead. There was a man, a stranger to these parts, asking about renting a boat around the time Lily disappeared. Didn't catch his name, but he had an accent, something European. As the sun climbed higher, the investigation encountered its first major setback. A critical piece of evidence, a discarded jacket found near the water's edge, had been mishandled, its significance lost amidst the initial chaos. Officers eager to piece together the fragmented clues now faced the harsh reality of their oversight. Despite these early missteps, the team pressed on, driven by a collective determination not to let Lily become another statistic. But as hours turned into days, the leaden weight of uncertainty loomed large. Rumors swirled, each more outlandish than the last, adding layers of confusion to an already tangled web. The town's local newspaper ran a headline that captured the community's anxiety. "Vanished without a trace, the mystery of Lily's disappearance." Below it, a plea from her family, begging for any information that could bring their daughter home. As night fell once more, Sheriff Daniels stood at the edge of the marina, staring out into the dark expanse of water. The sea's gentle lapping against the dock was a stark contrast to the turmoil within. He replayed the events of the past 2 days in his mind, searching for anything they might have missed. In the quiet solitude, a chilling possibility took root. What if the answers they sought lay not in the known, but in the shadows cast by those they least suspected? The thought lingered, a haunting spectre refusing to be ignored. And so, as the first 48 hours drew to a close, the investigation hung in a precarious balance. The clock was ticking, and the truth, whatever it may be, remained elusive. But one thing was certain: the people of Cedar Key would not rest until Lily's story was told. Sheriff Daniels, his mind heavy with unanswered questions, turned away from the water's edge and headed back to the bustling command center set up at the town's community hall. Inside, a cacophony of voices filled the air, officers coordinating search efforts, mapping out the areas covered and those still needing attention. The first 48 hours were crucial, and yet those fleeting hours were slipping through their fingers like sand. Daniels gathered his team, urging them to focus on the details, no matter how insignificant they seemed. There was no room for error now. They needed a breakthrough. The phone rang incessantly, tips streaming in from concerned citizens, each call a new lead to chase. One witness claimed to have seen a suspicious vehicle parked near the marina late at night, its headlights cutting through the fog. Another spoke of a young woman matching Lily's description, seen arguing with a man on the boardwalk earlier in the day she vanished. Lily's parents sat in the corner, a silent vigil among the chaos. Their faces were etched with an anguish that cut deeper than words could express. Her mother clutched a photograph of Lily, her fingers tracing the edges as if it were a lifeline. Her father, stoic and unyielding, spoke to the officers with a quiet determination, insisting that Lily would never leave without a word. Meanwhile, deputies canvassed the town, interviewing anyone who might have crossed paths with Lily that day. From shopkeepers to tourists, each account added pieces to a puzzle that refused to form a coherent picture. The local diner waitress, her eyes wide with concern, mentioned seeing Lily with a man she'd never seen before. A man who seemed agitated, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Despite their best efforts, the investigation was marred by early missteps. The mishandling of the discarded jacket, now likely contaminated, was a blunder that haunted the team. It was a mistake that could cost them dearly, a reminder of the fine line between success and failure in cases like these. As the sun dipped below the horizon on the second night, the weight of their task pressed heavily on the shoulders of all involved. Sheriff Daniels gathered his deputies once more, his voice steady but urgent. They needed to go back over everything, to see what they had missed, to find the thread that would unravel the truth. But as they regrouped, a new piece of information arrived. A sighting of a boat, unregistered and unfamiliar, seen leaving the marina shortly before dawn, the day after Lily disappeared. The witness, a retired fisherman, swore it was out of place, its presence a stark anomaly in the otherwise quiet waters. With this new lead, hope flickered anew. It was a tenuous connection, but it was something, a sliver of light in the dark. As the town of Cedar Key held its collective breath, the investigation took a new direction. The clock was still ticking, but each second brought them closer to answers. And beneath the surface, in the shadows, the truth waited, biding its time. The retired fisherman's account of the mysterious boat offered a glimmer of hope, but as the days turned to weeks, that hope began to flicker and fade. Investigators scoured the marina, questioning anyone who might have seen or heard anything unusual. Yet much like the tide that ebbed and flowed along the coast, the leads were slippery, elusive, and ultimately led them nowhere. Local gossip filled the void, left by the absence of concrete evidence. In small towns, whispers travel faster than the wind, and soon everyone knew someone who had a theory. Theories, however, are not evidence, and while the townsfolk speculated, the investigation hit a wall. The mysterious man from the diner became the first suspect in the court of public opinion, his identity unknown, but his presence haunting. Rumors swirled around another potential suspect, a young man known for his erratic behavior and troubled past. He was often seen wandering the outskirts of town, his eyes distant and his demeanor unsettling. People spoke of him in hushed tones, suggesting he had crossed paths with Lily before. The investigators pursued this lead with vigor, hoping it might bear fruit. But as they delved deeper into his life, the evidence failed to support the suspicions. He had a solid alibi, corroborated by multiple witnesses, and no motive that could tie him to Lily's disappearance. The cloud of suspicion that had gathered around him dissipated, leaving the investigation no closer to the truth than before. Meanwhile, the town's anxiety grew. Every unmarked car, every unfamiliar face was scrutinized, the community caught in a cycle of fear and suspicion. For Lily's family, the days stretched into an endless blur of grief and uncertainty. Her mother, once vibrant and full of life, now moved like a shadow through her own home, clutching to the hope of seeing her daughter again. Sheriff Daniels, burdened by the weight of their failure to find Lily, called for a press conference hoping to reignite public interest and draw out new witnesses. Cameras flashed as he spoke, the urgency in his voice palpable. Yet, as the days turned into months, the story faded from the headlines, replaced by newer, more sensational news. The case file grew thicker with each passing week, but it remained a collection of dead ends and dashed hopes. The jacket, once a promising clue, was now a symbol of their missteps, a reminder of what had been lost in the chaos of those early hours. And so, the investigation went cold, the leads dried up, and the town of Cedar Key settled into an uneasy silence. Yet beneath this silence, there was a persistent, lingering question. What had truly happened to Lily on that fateful day? As the autumn months crept in, the chill in the air mirrored the chill in the hearts of those who still searched for answers. The truth, it seemed, was a ghost, flitting just out of reach, waiting for the moment to reveal itself. Whispers began to circulate among the residents of Cedar Key, whispers that carried suspicions like autumn leaves caught in a gust. Names were exchanged in hushed tones at the local diner, over the fences in backyards, and in the pews of the old church. With Lily's absence hanging over the town like a storm cloud, rumors were the only currency that seemed to hold any value. Some pointed fingers at the young drifter, who had passed through town just days before Lily disappeared. He was a stranger, they said, with eyes that seemed too eager to avoid contact. Others spoke of the reclusive fisherman who lived on the outskirts of town, known for his eccentric behavior and solitary lifestyle. But each lead, when pursued, unraveled into nothing more than speculation. Sheriff Daniels, feeling the weight of the community's expectations, followed each rumor with the hope that one might bear fruit. Yet, as each potential suspect was questioned, their stories held firm, alibis intact, leaving the investigation tangled in a web of conjecture. The drifter, it turned out, had moved on before Lily vanished, his whereabouts confirmed by bus tickets and witnesses. The fisherman, though peculiar, was found to be harmless, his life an open book of predictable routines and quiet evenings spent alone. The media, once fervent in its coverage, had moved on to other stories, leaving behind only the occasional mention of Lily's case in passing. The spotlight that had once shone brightly on Cedar Key dimmed, casting long shadows that seemed to swallow any hope of resolution. In the absence of progress, the town began to fracture. Neighbors who once shared coffee and conversation grew wary of one another. The trust that had been the fabric of their community began to fray, each thread pulled taut by the uncertainty and fear that lingered in the air. Lily's family remained steadfast in their search for answers, organizing vigils and handing out flyers, their faces a canvas of exhaustion and determination. Her father, a man of few words, stood at the town's entrance each weekend, holding a sign that simply read, "Have you seen Lily?" His presence was a testament to an unyielding hope, a silent plea for the truth. As the leaves turned and fell, so too did the belief that Lily would be found. The case, cold and unyielding, seemed to slip further from their grasp with each passing day. Yet beneath the layers of doubt and despair, the feeling persisted that somewhere, someone knew more than they were letting on. Questions lingered like ghosts in the minds of those who cared. What had happened on that sunny afternoon? Who had last seen her smile, heard her laugh? And why, in a town so small, could no one find the answers? The investigation, it seemed, had hit an impassable wall, with each turn leading only to more questions. But as winter approached, with its promise of long nights and introspection, the town of Cedar Key would soon discover that the shadows held secrets, and the truth was waiting for the right moment to step into the light. The winters in Cedar Key, though mild compared to the northern climes, brought with them a chill that seeped into the bones of the town. Time had a way of stretching out in the cold months, each day marked by the absence of Lily's laughter and the void she left behind. The community, once vibrant and tight-knit, had learned to live with the weight of unsolved tragedy, a silent companion that shadowed every gathering and whispered in the spaces between conversations. Lily's family, however, refused to let the silence swallow them. Her mother, Claire, turned her grief into action, poring over every detail of the case with a tenacity that bordered on obsessive. Her kitchen table, once a place of family meals and shared stories, transformed into a war room, littered with newspaper clippings, police reports, and maps marked with red ink. Claire's eyes, once bright and filled with warmth, now bore the haunted look of a woman who had seen too much and understood too little. The town, for the most part, had moved on. New families moved into the neighborhood, unaware of the history that lay beneath the surface. Businesses opened and closed, and life continued in its unyielding march forward. But for Claire and her family, time had frozen on that fateful day in 1992. Each passing year without answers only deepened their resolve, solidifying their belief that someone in Cedar Key held the key to the mystery. Determined not to let Lily's case fade into obscurity, Claire took it upon herself to hire a private investigator. Thomas Greer was a retired detective from Miami, known for his meticulous nature and dogged pursuit of the truth. He approached the case with fresh eyes, sifting through the layers of evidence and testimony that had gathered dust over the years. Greer's presence in Cedar Key was met with mixed reactions. For some, he was a beacon of hope, while others viewed him as an unwelcome reminder of unresolved pain. As Greer delved deeper, he uncovered inconsistencies in the original investigation, witness statements that had been overlooked, potential suspects dismissed too quickly. He found threads that, when pulled, threatened to unravel the carefully constructed reality of the town. Rumors began to circulate once more, whispers in the grocery aisles and murmurs at the diner, as Greer's findings hinted at a cover-up, a deliberate attempt to obfuscate the truth. For Lily's family, each new piece of information was a double-edged sword, offering both hope and heartache. The revelation that the investigation had been flawed from the beginning reignited their anger and sorrow, but it also rekindled their determination. Perhaps after all these years, they were finally on the verge of discovering what truly happened to their daughter. Yet as the community began to stir with renewed interest, a question loomed large over Cedar Key. Could the truth once revealed ever truly mend the rifts that had formed in the wake of tragedy? And would the answers they sought bring peace, or would they only deepen the scars left by Lily's disappearance? As spring approached, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings, the shadows that had long enveloped Cedar Key began to shift. The truth, long buried beneath the sands of time, was poised to emerge. But the town would soon learn that some secrets, once unearthed, have the power to change everything. In the years that followed Lily's disappearance, Cedar Key settled into a quiet routine, the kind that small towns often adopt in the aftermath of tragedy. But for Lily's family, the passage of time only deepened their anguish. The familiar rhythms of everyday life became a constant reminder of the daughter they had lost, her absence a shadow that lingered in every corner of their home. They clung to hope, but hope, as they discovered, is a double-edged sword. The family's modest living room transformed into a makeshift command center, walls adorned with maps, timelines, and photographs of Lily. Every day, Lily's mother would sit at the kitchen table, sifting through old case files and newspaper clippings, her eyes scanning for any overlooked detail that might lead to a breakthrough. Her father, once full of boisterous energy, became more reserved, his laughter replaced by a solemn resolve to uncover the truth. Their search extended beyond their home. They hired private investigators, reached out to retired detectives, appealed to cold case units across the state, yet each effort ended in frustration. Each dead end felt like losing Lily all over again. The community, once so supportive, began to move on. New families moved in, old ones left, and Lily's story became a ghost of the past, whispered about only in hushed tones at the local bar. But the family refused to let Lily's memory fade. Every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, they held a vigil at the edge of the sea, the gentle lapping of the waves their only company. They lit candles, their flames flickering like fragile beacons against the encroaching darkness. In those moments of quiet reflection, they found a semblance of solace, a reminder that they were not alone in their grief. As the years slipped by, the pain became a part of them, an old wound that ached with the changing seasons. They learned to live with it, to carry it with a grace that belied the turmoil beneath. The town's children grew up, its streets changed, but the family's resolve remained unyielding. They held on to the belief that one day the truth would surface, and justice would be served. Behind closed doors, Thomas Greer continued his relentless pursuit. He had become an unlikely ally, a fixture in their lives, driven not just by professional curiosity, but by a personal commitment to see the case through. He combed through the town's history, piecing together a mosaic of secrets and lies. each discovery leading him closer to a revelation that promised to shake the community to its core. Yet, Cedar Key, with its idyllic facade, harbored its own secrets. There were those who whispered of connections to powerful figures, of truths buried to protect reputations. As whispers turned to murmurs, Greer found himself at the center of a storm, his investigation stirring old resentments and unearthing long-buried animosities. And then, just as hope seemed a distant memory, a breakthrough emerged, unexpected, like a bolt of lightning on a clear day. It came from an unlikely source, a seemingly inconsequential piece of evidence that had languished in a forgotten file. It was a detail so small, so easily overlooked, yet it held the key to unraveling the mystery. As the family gathered around Greer, their hearts a tumult of anticipation and fear, he laid out the new evidence before them. This discovery, he explained, had the potential to change everything. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment palpable. Could this finally be the moment they had been waiting for? Would this be the piece that completed the puzzle? In that charged silence, a new question arose, one that would haunt them as they moved forward. If the truth was indeed within their grasp, were they truly prepared for the answers it would bring? The silence in the room stretched, each second laden with the weight of years gone by. Faces etched with lines of worry and time turned towards Thomas Greer, their silent plea for answers mirrored in their eyes. The piece of evidence he had uncovered, a weathered photograph from a town festival, seemed innocuous at first glance. But it was the figure in the background, half obscured by shadows, that drew his intense scrutiny. For the family of Sarah Mitchell, the years had been a relentless storm of grief and frustration. They had watched as life in Cedar Key continued, as neighbors went about their routines, seemingly untouched by the tragedy that had torn their world apart. Yet beneath their composed exteriors, the Mitchells were driven by an unyielding resolve to find the truth about their daughter's disappearance. The town, with its sunlit beaches and postcard-perfect vistas, had moved forward in the way only time allows. New families settled, businesses opened and closed, and the whispers of Sarah's disappearance faded into the background noise of life. But for the Mitchells, every year was another without answers, another spent probing memories and following faint trails that led to dead ends. Thomas Greer, once a fresh-faced investigator, had become a seasoned veteran of cold cases, his reputation both feared and respected in Cedar Key. His commitment to Sarah's case had transcended duty. It had become a promise, one that drove him through countless nights of poring over old files and re-interviewing faded witnesses. As the years slipped by, the Mitchells' home became a sanctuary of sorts for those who remembered. Their front room evolved into a makeshift war room, walls lined with maps and notes, photographs pinned in a desperate tapestry of connections. It was here that they met with Greer, each session a mix of hope and despair, as they reviewed the scant evidence, always searching for the missed clue that would break the silence. The community, while outwardly supportive, had its own share of secrets. Cedar Key held onto its mysteries tightly, its history intertwined with those who wielded power and influence. Greer's investigations had ruffled more than a few feathers, his relentless questions poking at old alliances and unspoken truths. Yet he pressed on, undeterred by the occasional warning or cold shoulder, and now this photograph, a relic from a forgotten box in the town's archives, offered a thread to pull. The shadowy figure, caught in a moment of careless obscurity, held potential answers. Greer had managed to enhance the image, revealing a face that was both familiar and enigmatic. It was a face known to the Mitchells, a person who had once been close to their family, now living quietly on the outskirts of town. As Greer laid out his findings, the Mitchells felt a spark of something long dormant, hope, yet with it came an undercurrent of fear. The figure in the photograph could either illuminate the path to truth or plunge them further into the labyrinth of deception that had ensnared their lives. The air in the room was electric with anticipation. Greer paused, choosing his words carefully. This new lead, he explained, had the potential to unravel years of silence, but it required courage to confront the past and those who had become ghosts in their own lives. The Mitchells exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. They were ready to face whatever lay ahead, to finally lift the veil on the mystery that had consumed their lives. As they prepared to confront the figure in the photograph, a question lingered, a question that promised to propel them into the next chapter of their harrowing journey. Would this lead bring them closer to justice, or would it unearth more secrets than they were prepared to face? The room buzzed with a silent intensity, the weight of the moment pressing down, as Greer folded the photograph and placed it back into the folder. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the streets of Cedar Key, as if echoing the shadows of the past now creeping into the present. Just as the Mitchells gathered their resolve to move forward, a knock at the door startled them. It was a young woman, her demeanor professional yet approachable, a badge glinting subtly on her belt. She introduced herself as Detective Lisa Hartwell, a new face in the Cedar Key Police Department. Her presence was a breath of fresh air, her determination evident in her eyes. She had heard of the case, the whispers of injustice that seemed to cling to it like a stubborn fog. Hartwell had recently transferred from Miami, bringing with her a keen interest in unsolved mysteries and a penchant for cutting-edge forensic techniques. Hartwell wasted no time. She had come bearing news, a breakthrough in forensic technology that could potentially crack open the Mitchell case. Genetic genealogy, she explained with a spark of enthusiasm, had become a powerful tool in solving cold cases across the country, and she believed it could be the key to identifying the person in the photograph. As she laid out her plan to apply this new technology to the evidence long stored away, the Mitchells listened with a mix of hope and apprehension. It was a lifeline, fragile yet promising. They knew the risks. Dredging up the past could unsettle the delicate balance of their lives, but the promise of truth was too alluring to ignore. Greer, ever the pragmatist, asked about the photograph. Could this new technology work with what they had? Hartwell nodded, her confidence unwavering. It wasn't just about the photo. It was about re-examining everything, the old evidence, the forgotten testimonies, the overlooked details that had been buried under years of neglect. With the Mitchells' consent, Hartwell set the wheels in motion, promising to keep them informed every step of the way. As she left, a sense of cautious optimism settled over the room. The path ahead was daunting, but for the first time in years, it felt like they were moving towards something tangible. Yet as the Mitchells and Greer sat in the fading light, a question hung in the air, a question that would not be easily answered. What would they find once the veil was lifted? Would it be the truth they longed for, or a revelation that would challenge everything they thought they knew? The promise of genetic genealogy was a beacon, but it also carried the potential to disrupt lives. As they pondered the implications, the night crept in, filling the room with a quiet determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As the night deepened, the Mitchells sat in a contemplative silence, their thoughts swirling like the winds over the coastal dunes. The potential of this new forensic approach was both exhilarating and terrifying. In the quiet of their living room, they couldn't help but wonder about the secrets hidden in the strands of DNA, tucked away in the evidence box that had long gathered dust. The dawn of a new day brought with it a renewed sense of purpose. Detective Hartwell, driven by a tenacious commitment to justice, wasted no time in reaching out to the forensic specialists who had pioneered the use of genetic genealogy. This team, led by Dr. Eve Larkin, had a reputation for unraveling the most tangled of mysteries, and Hartwell knew they were the best chance at breathing new life into this decades-old case. As the wheels of justice began to turn once more, the coastal town of Clearwater buzzed with whispers of progress. The Mitchells were cautiously optimistic, their patience worn thin by years of false leads and shattered hopes. Yet, somewhere deep within, there was a flicker of hope, a belief that this time could be different. Meanwhile, Dr. Larkin and her team began their meticulous process, starting with the photograph that had haunted the case for so long. It was a grainy image, captured by chance, but within its pixels lay potential clues. By applying advanced imaging techniques, they hoped to unearth any overlooked details that might point them toward the suspect's identity. But it wasn't just the photograph that held promise. The team carefully extracted DNA from the old evidence, a painstaking task that required precision and patience. As the samples were sent to the lab, Hartwell and Larkin exchanged frequent updates, their anticipation building with each passing hour. Days turned into weeks as the town held its collective breath, waiting for the breakthrough that had eluded them for so long. Then, one afternoon, Hartwell received a call that sent a jolt through her. It was Dr. Larkin, her voice electric with excitement. They had a match. The revelation came with a surge of adrenaline, a name previously unknown, linked to the DNA found at the scene. It was a lead that had been buried beneath layers of time and neglect, now thrust into the light by the relentless pursuit of truth. Hartwell immediately contacted the Mitchells, their emotions swinging between disbelief and an overwhelming sense of vindication. This name was a thread, one that could unravel the mystery that had consumed their lives for over 2 decades. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the town, Hartwell prepared to take the next steps. The new information was a spark, igniting a renewed investigation that promised to delve deeper than ever before. Yet, as the Mitchells absorbed this new development, another question loomed large. Who was this person linked to their tragedy? And why had they remained hidden in the shadows for so long? The answers lay ahead, shrouded in uncertainty, but for the first time they had a direction, a path that might finally lead them to justice. The stage was set for the next phase of the investigation, one that promised to peel back the layers of deception and reveal the truth in its raw, unvarnished form. The journey was far from over, and as the pieces began to fall into place, the town braced itself for the revelations that lay ahead. Hartwell stood in her office, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The name that the DNA match had revealed was Glenn Montgomery, a resident of the town with no prior criminal record, a man whose life had intersected with the Mitchells in ways they were only beginning to understand. As she prepared to delve deeper into Montgomery's background, a new element entered the narrative. Detective Marcus Hayes, an investigator known for his work on cold cases, had been brought in to assist. His reputation for uncovering hidden truths preceded him, and his arrival injected a fresh sense of urgency into the investigation. Hayes wasted no time, scanning through decades-old files with a practiced eye, his mind a whirl of possibilities. He brought with him a novel approach, forensic genealogy, a cutting-edge technology that had only recently begun to revolutionize the field. It promised to shed light on the darkest corners of the past by tracing familial connections that could lead them directly to the perpetrator. The town buzzed with speculation as rumors of this new technique spread. Families that had lived in quiet anonymity for years were now potential links in a chain that might lead to the truth. The Mitchells, buoyed by this glimmer of hope, clung to each update with a fierce determination. Days turned into a blur of activity as Hayes and Hartwell worked side by side, piecing together a mosaic of data. The town's history unfolded before them, an intricate tapestry of relationships and secrets, each thread potentially tugging them closer to the truth. Then, a breakthrough. A deathbed confession from a man named Arthur Gaines, long suspected of knowing more than he had ever let on, reached Hartwell's ears. In his final moments, he had spoken of a night in 1992, of shadows moving furtively, of hushed voices and a plan gone awry. His words hinted at a conspiracy, a group of individuals who had vowed to protect each other at any cost. Hartwell and Hayes were electrified by this development. Gaines had named individuals previously thought to be mere bystanders, their roles now cast in a new sinister light. It was a revelation that promised to crack the case wide open, yet it also raised more questions than answers. The tension in the town was palpable as the investigation gathered momentum. Each revelation was a double-edged sword, offering hope, but also deepening the mystery. Who else had been complicit in the events of that fateful night, and what had driven them to such lengths to conceal the truth? As the sun dipped below the horizon once more, casting long shadows over the coastal town, Hartwell and Hayes knew the endgame was approaching. But with each step forward, the stakes grew higher, the truth more elusive. The answers lay tantalizingly close, yet still out of reach, their outlines blurred by the passage of time and the fog of deception. The stage was set for the final act, a confrontation with the ghosts of the past that promised to bring closure or unleash a storm that would change everything. The town held its breath, waiting for the truth to finally emerge from the shadows. As the moonlight spilled across the silent streets of the coastal town, Hartwell and Hayes found themselves in the dimly lit archives of the county courthouse. The air was thick with dust and the faint smell of aged paper, a testament to the decades of secrets hidden within these walls. Here, beneath flickering fluorescent lights, they sought the truth buried deep in the past. Arthur Gaines's confession had set off a chain reaction, prompting the duo to revisit the case files with a newfound intensity. They meticulously combed through witness statements, old police reports, and photographs, searching for discrepancies that might have been overlooked in the initial investigation. Gaines had named individuals, but it was the connections between them, the web of relationships, that now held the key. Hayes paused, her eyes narrowing on a photograph of a community picnic from the summer of 1992. In the background, barely noticeable, was a group of men standing together, their expressions unreadable, their postures casual, yet somehow conspiratorial. Among them was a man who had slipped through their grasp for too long, a man who had remained a shadowy figure in the periphery of their investigation, Martin Caldwell. Caldwell, a respected local businessman, had always maintained an aura of untouchability. His involvement in the town's charitable events and his generous donations to the church had painted him as a pillar of the community. Yet, Gaines's words had hinted at Caldwell's darker side, at the lengths he might go to protect his interests. The pieces began to fall into place. A financial record unearthed by Hartwell revealed a series of transactions between Caldwell and other named individuals, payments made in the weeks leading up to the disappearance of the victim, Julie Turner. These were not the actions of a mere bystander. They were the hallmarks of someone orchestrating a cover-up. But it was Hayes who found the final piece of the puzzle, a forgotten box of evidence stored at the far end of the archive. Inside, a scrap of fabric stained with what appeared to be blood. Modern forensic technology had advanced leaps and bounds since 1992, and this small piece of evidence, once thought irrelevant, was now a potential goldmine of information. The next morning, they rushed the fabric to the state-of-the-art forensic lab, their hearts pounding with anticipation. The technicians worked with precision, extracting minute traces of DNA that had survived the passage of time. Each step in the process was a crescendo of tension, the outcome uncertain yet tantalizingly close. Finally, the results came in, a match. The DNA belonged to Martin Caldwell. The revelation was staggering, the implications profound. Not only had Caldwell been present on the night of Julie Turner's disappearance, but he had also been intimately involved in the crime. The facade he had maintained for decades was about to crumble, exposing the darkness beneath. But as Hartwell and Hayes prepared to confront Caldwell, a new question emerged. Who else had been part of this conspiracy? Gaines's confession had named others, and the town's history suggested a deeper, more pervasive rot hidden beneath its picturesque surface. The clock was ticking. They had uncovered the truth, but they needed to act before the fragile tapestry of evidence unraveled, before Caldwell and his accomplices could slip away into the shadows once more. The arrest was imminent, but the danger was far from over. The town, still unaware of the storm about to descend, continued its routine, oblivious to the fact that the past was about to collide with the present in a way that would leave no one untouched. The truth was out there, waiting to be grasped, but with it came the terrifying possibility that not everyone would survive the fallout. As the morning sun crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across the sleepy coastal town, Hartwell and Hayes stood at the precipice of a groundbreaking moment. Inside the sterile confines of the forensic lab, the air was thick with anticipation and the hum of high-tech machinery. They held in their hands not just a piece of fabric, but the key to unraveling a decades-old mystery. Their minds raced with the implications of the DNA match. Martin Caldwell, a man who had skillfully blended into the fabric of the community, was now irreversibly tied to Julie Turner's disappearance. Hartwell's voice broke the silence. "We need to move quickly. Caldwell's had years to cover his tracks, and if Gaines's confession is any indication, he's not working alone." Hayes nodded, her eyes reflecting the gravity of the task ahead. They both knew that with each passing moment, the risk of Caldwell and his accomplices vanishing increased. As they prepared their strategy, a call came in. It was the lab, and the news was electrifying. Further analysis of the fabric had revealed not just Caldwell's DNA, but a partial match to another individual, a familial connection. The possibility sent a shiver down their spines. This new discovery suggested a network more intricate than they had imagined. "We need to dig deeper into Caldwell's family," Hayes suggested, her mind already piecing together connections and relationships. There was a chance this familial link could be the missing piece that tied everything together, a potential accomplice lurking within the shadows of Caldwell's past. Back in the archives, they scoured through old records, piecing together a timeline of Caldwell's life. It was a painstaking process, each file a breadcrumb leading them down a dark and twisted path. They discovered a brother, long estranged and living on the fringes of society, a man with a history of violence and a penchant for disappearing when the heat was on. The revelation was a thunderclap. Could this brother have been the one Gaines hinted at, the other player in this sinister game? The pieces were aligning, but they needed more, something concrete to tie the brother to the crime scene. With the clock ticking, Hartwell and Hayes decided to visit Caldwell's last known residence. It was a modest house, unremarkable in every way, yet it held secrets that could crack the case wide open. As they approached, a sense of foreboding settled over them. The quiet street seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the past to erupt into the present. Inside, they found remnants of a life lived in shadows. A dusty photograph of the Caldwell brothers, a locked drawer filled with journals that hinted at a shared history of darkness and deceit. Each page revealed more of the brothers' involvement, his connection not just to Caldwell but to the events of that fateful night in 1992. The web was tightening around the siblings, but Hartwell and Hayes knew they had to act fast. The evidence was compelling, but they needed to catch the brothers before they could slip away, before the truth could be buried once more. As they raced back to headquarters, a plan formed. They would confront Caldwell, using the newfound evidence to pressure him into revealing the full extent of the conspiracy. It was a risk, but one they were willing to take. They were on the brink of exposing a killer hidden in plain sight, and with him, a network of secrets that had poisoned the town for far too long. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the town as Hartwell and Hayes prepared to bring the darkness into the light. The stage was set for the confrontation of a lifetime, and the town, blissfully unaware, was about to witness its deepest secrets laid bare. As Hartwell and Hayes arrived at the precinct, the air seemed charged with anticipation. There was no turning back now. The pieces of the puzzle were about to fall into place. With the journals and photographs in hand, they knew they had the leverage needed to crack the case that had haunted them for years. They sat in the dimly lit interrogation room, every creak of the building echoing their impatience. Caldwell was brought in, his demeanor nonchalant, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to engulf him. For years, he had been the picture of normalcy, a respected teacher at the local high school, known for his dedication to students and his involvement in community programs. Parents trusted him, children admired him. To everyone in the town, he was a pillar of the community. But beneath that genial facade, a darker reality lurked. As the questioning began, Caldwell maintained his innocence, his voice steady and composed. But Hartwell and Hayes were prepared for his denials. They laid out the evidence methodically, each piece a chisel cracking the veneer of his calm. The photograph of the brothers, the journals hinting at a tangled web of deceit, the timeline that placed him in the vicinity on that fateful night, all of it painted a damning picture. Caldwell's composure started to slip as the evidence mounted. The journals, written in a hurried scrawl, spoke of a bond with his brother that was both protective and destructive. They hinted at a pact made in the heat of the moment, a decision that had spiraled into a lifetime of lies. Hartwell leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "We know about the pact, Caldwell. We know your brother was more involved than you ever let on. This is your chance to come clean." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Caldwell's eyes darted to the floor, his facade crumbling. Then, almost imperceptibly, his shoulders sagged. The truth, long buried, was clawing its way to the surface. "It was never supposed to happen like that," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We were just supposed to scare her, make her think twice about talking, but it got out of hand. Michael, he was always the one pushing too far." The confession was a jolt, a shocking revelation that the townspeople could never have anticipated. Michael, Caldwell's older brother, had been the one to cross the line, but it was Caldwell who spent years covering for him, living a double life of guilt and respectability. As the confession poured out, Hartwell and Hayes knew they had what they needed. The arrest was swift, the shockwaves immediate. The community reeled as the truth about their trusted neighbor, the man who had taught their children, was laid bare. The narrative of a respected member of society being a killer in plain sight was both chilling and heartbreaking. Yet beneath the layers of betrayal, there was a glimmer of relief. The silence of 1992 had finally found its voice, and with it, justice for the victim whose life had been so cruelly taken. As Caldwell was led away, the town began to grapple with the knowledge that evil had nestled in their midst, hidden behind a familiar smile. But for Hartwell and Hayes, there was still work to be done. The full extent of the conspiracy and the aftermath of the arrest were yet to unfold. The story was nearing its end, but the final chapter remained to be written. As Caldwell was escorted out in handcuffs, a hush fell over the precinct, a silence laden with the weight of truth finally revealed. The townspeople, once clinging to the comforting veneer of their community, now faced the unsettling reality that one of their own had harbored such darkness. Inside the interrogation room, Hartwell and Hayes sat with a mixture of relief and trepidation. They had unraveled a tangled web, but the thread still lingered, begging for closure. The confession had confirmed their suspicions, yet the story of the victim, Emily Saunders, demanded more than just answers. It needed justice. The trial was swift, propelled by the undeniable evidence and Caldwell's own admissions. The courtroom was packed, filled with faces that once greeted Caldwell on morning walks, parents who entrusted their children to his care. Their expressions were a tapestry of shock, betrayal, and a yearning for closure. During the proceedings, Caldwell's defense attempted to paint a picture of coercion, of a man who had been led astray by his domineering brother. But the jury, swayed by the gravity of his confession and the detailed testimony of investigators, remained unmoved. The verdict, guilty on all counts. The sentence, life without parole. The sentencing brought a somber kind of relief to Emily's family. Her parents, aged by decades of unanswered questions, sat stoically, tears glistening in their eyes. Her mother whispered a quiet "thank you" to Hartwell as they left the courtroom, a gesture of gratitude for the tenacity and empathy that finally brought them peace. In the months that followed, the coastal town of Cedar Point began to heal, though the scars of betrayal ran deep. The local school, once a symbol of community trust, underwent changes, with new leadership determined to rebuild the shattered faith. Conversations at local diners and town halls shifted from whispers of shock to discussions of how to better protect their children and support one another. A scholarship in Emily's name was established, a beacon of hope and remembrance, ensuring that her life, though cut short, would continue to inspire future generations. For Hartwell and Hayes, the case left an indelible mark. It was a reminder of the shadows that can lurk behind the most familiar facades, a testament to the resilience of truth in the face of deception. As they packed away the files, now closed but never forgotten, they reflected on the nature of justice. Not just a means to an end, but a journey of remembrance and redemption. In the quiet moments, long after the cameras had gone and the headlines faded, the story of Emily Saunders lingered. It was a narrative of loss and love, of a community forced to reckon with its past, and of the enduring power of truth to illuminate even the darkest corners. As the town moved forward, a mural of Emily was painted on the side of the local library, her smile a reminder of innocence and the enduring quest for justice. It stood as a promise that, while the past cannot be changed, the future is shaped by those willing to confront the truths we hold most dear. And so the story of Cedar Point became not just one of a crime solved, but a testament to the strength of a community that refused to let silence be its legacy. It was a powerful reflection on how justice, when finally served, becomes a part of the collective memory, a beacon guiding the way forward.